So I am Stephen Rothberg with College Recruiter, between now and the top of the hour, I'm going to be talking about programmatic job advertising, cost per click, cost per application. They're all different. They're very related to each other. And during today's presentation, I'm going to talk about 5 main things. First, I'll just sort of introduce myself and my company very, very briefly, so that those who aren't familiar will sort of understand, who this guy is and what he might know or might not know. I'm going to talk about the words programmatic and other words like that, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about exactly what that means. Pay per click, for example, means different things to different job boards. But I'll talk with some definitions so that we can make sure that we all understand what we're really talking about. I'm going to go through some key dates in the industry. I think it'll help to provide some context for why I believe that programmatic and pay for performance advertising is about to overwhelm traditional duration-based advertising, and to do so very quickly. I'm going to make the business case for why programmatic is a good solution for recruitment advertising, and also when it's not. And then I'll talk at the end, and this is going to be especially for the recruitment marketers in the room, whether you work for a job board or a staffing company or an employer, about how to prepare for these changes if they're coming to your market. And that if is a big if, because it's not going to come to every market, and it's not going to come to every market to the markets all at the same time. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It does not look like this today, fortunately. It is 70 degrees Fahrenheit, about 21 degrees Celsius. It's a beautiful day here, but it did look like this about a month ago. If you see that horizontal kind of silver thing running from left to right across the top of the screen, that's what we call skyways. They're basically elevated indoor sidewalks, and you can walk dozens of miles around downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul in the Twin Cities without ever having to go outside. So tens of thousands of people live in apartments and other buildings, and then walk to work connected through the skyways, and they never have to go outside. Our city is probably best known for this gentleman, Prince. One of my life's greatest regrets is that I never saw him live. He died way too young. I thought I had more time. Lesson learned from his death and the death of others in COVID is, if something matters, do it today. Don't wait till next year. We're also, unfortunately, well known for the city where George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department. Happened about 8 blocks from where I live. 8 miles, I'm sorry, from where I live. And I know the ramifications of that were felt around the world, but obviously we were kind of ground zero for a lot of that. This is what it looks like today in Minneapolis. We're called the City of Lakes. There are literally hundreds of lakes right within the metro area, where you can go sailing, play beach volleyball, whatever. Very high quality of life for about 9 months of the year. And then the other 3 months of the year, we prefer not to talk about them. College Recruiter is a job search site. We believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. We have about 5 million students and recent graduates of colleges and universities using our site. We're global at any given time. We have about 1.5 million job postings active on our site, part-time, seasonal, internship, apprenticeship, and entry-level jobs, all of which are in English. We're moving toward multi-language support. We are hoping to be there in 2023. We're content rich. We have over 40,000 pages of articles, blogs, videos, etc. And we partner with hundreds of schools and online school newspapers, etc., to drive traffic. And we do that programmatically. So some definitions. First, the biggest definition, or if we're going to disagree or people are going to be uncertain about what a particular word means, it's probably the very first one, programmatic. There are different definitions for it. Multiple definitions are probably correct. There are going to be some that are wrong. But at the end of the day, all it really means is that we're using software to drive or to our buying decisions. So in other words, if an employer posts a job to a job board, whether it's College Recruiter or Indeed or Adzuna or Talent.com or just about any job board, that job board almost certainly will take that job posting and then repost it or distribute it to other job boards. And it's somewhat similar to what third-party recruiters, or in some countries like the UK, they refer to them as agencies, do when they do a split, where one recruiter is working with the employer, another recruiter is working with the candidate, and they basically partner. They come together, they split the fee that the employer might pay to place the candidate. And that way it works to the benefit both of the candidate and also the employer. And it's the recruiter, the source of that match, that ends up splitting a fee. And in the job board world, you don't get a placement fee, you get an advertising fee. And that might be X dollars or euros or pounds per month. It might be on a cost per click basis. It might be on a cost per application basis. Now, when I talk about CPC, cost per click, what I'm referring to there is what almost every job board in the world uses to define that, other than Indeed. A couple of years ago, Indeed redefined what the click is. So if a candidate goes to Indeed, runs a search, finds your job posting, clicks on the job title, and pulls up what we call the job description page. That's where you have your job description, your requirements, etc. And they're on Indeed. When they do that, that is the click that you're paying for. Almost every other job board, the click that you're paying for is when the candidate goes to the web page, the URL, the ATS, etc., that you tell the job board you want them to go to. Now, for some employers, they want the candidate to apply on the job board. For some employers, they want the candidate to go to an online assessment. And for some employers, they want the candidate going to the employer's website, which often includes an ATS, an applicant tracking system. But regardless, when you post your job, whether you do it manually by sitting at your keyboard and typing it in, or whether you automate it by sending a feed of like all or a bunch of your job postings, whatever URL, whatever web page address you provide to the job board, when the candidate goes to that URL, that's the click. For us, overwhelmingly, that click is when the candidate goes to the employer's site, hopefully to apply. So it's important when you're considering a cost per click campaign and you're considering multiple job boards, that you understand exactly what triggers that cost. What does the candidate need to do for you to owe that cost per click, whether that's 50 euros or 0.5 euros, 50 cents, whatever that cost is. Similarly, cost per application, that can occur on the job board when the candidate completes the application on the job board, and then that job board delivers the candidate data to you, sometimes by email, sometimes there's an integration with your ATS. That can be the application. But at other times, the application can be when the candidate goes to your site and applies on your site. perhaps through your ATS. Again, just make sure when you're negotiating or working it out with the job board that you just understand and that they understand exactly what that click is or that application is, what triggers it. Some key dates. In the mid 1990s is basically when the internet came into existence. It's the same time when College Recruiter was born. The first version of our site went live way back in 1996. It's hard to believe, but Google didn't come along until a couple of years later. And then in 99, a few things happened. Now, for the hockey fans in the room, I'm not referring to Wayne Gretzky. I'm not referring to another 99. And I'm certainly not referring to Levin's favorite band or song 99 Luftballons. He is old enough to have danced hard to that song. What I'm referring to is 1999. That was a big turning point, not just for College Recruiter, but more importantly, kind of for the internet in general. A lot of organizations, including ours, reached a tipping point or a big change in 1999. It's when people stopped looking at the internet as a curiosity and they started to look at the internet as being integral to their business, regardless of what kind of business it was. Until about 99, most internet sites were put up as kind of a, well, I guess we should have an internet presence. And very few businesses had any kind of a real strategy around it because it was such the Wild West. People didn't really know what was ethical, what was not, what was legal, what was not, what was good practice, what was not. But by 99, it was becoming the norm. That's when we committed to digital and started to close down our print publications. We had printed employment magazines, for example. It wasn't until 2002 when Google launched their AdWords program, and that's where almost all of their revenue comes from. So it took them 4 years to really drive any kind of revenue. A year later was the birth of cost per click in the job board world. Top USA Jobs, a family-owned business in Florida. Don Firth is the CEO. I know him well. They became the first cost per click job board in 2003. So what, 19 years ago? A year later, Indeed launched. So if anybody tells you that Indeed created cost per click, they did not. But they do take credit and should take credit for popularizing cost per click. And then 6 years ago is when we launched what we call JobsThatScale. That's our cost per click job posting product for employers that are hiring at scale, dozens, hundreds, thousands a year. And about a year ago, we started to accept postings outside of North America. And now about 15% of our business is what we call international, outside of North America. So why should anybody, whether you're an employer, a staffing company, an advertising agency, a job board, why should we care about programmatic and performance-based advertising? Performance-based advertising largely being cost per click and cost per application. One thing is that it shifts risk and it eliminates risk. So it shifts the risk of an ad not performing away from the advertiser and to the media. For example, if an employer pays, say, 1,000 euros to run a job posting ad in Germany, that's a kind of a normal price in Germany, far higher than in most of the rest of the world. The advertiser, the employer, pays that money whether or not the ad works, whether the ad generates 1 application or 1,000 applications. And so they assume the risk. If you've heard the expression post and pray, that's where it comes from. You post your job and you pray that it works. By shifting to cost per click or cost per application, the media, the job board, only gets paid if they deliver candidates. Now, the candidates might be of high quality, they might not be, but at least they have to perform. There's something there that they need to deliver to you in order for them to receive anything. If you walk into a restaurant and you order a steak and they do not deliver the steak to your table, you don't pay. But the reality is you want the steak and you want to pay for the steak, especially if the steak is of high quality. So pay-per-click and pay-per-application job posting ads align your interests. Your interests as the advertiser are then the same, or at least more similar to that of the media, the job board, because you want applications, you want candidates going to your site, and then so does the job board, because that's how they get paid. By shifting the risk, you also enhance the likelihood or increase the likelihood that you're going to get better volume and that your cost is going to be lower, or that the quality will be higher. And I'll talk later about how you probably can't get all of those, and you're going to sort of need to sort of pick and choose. It also increases the revenue for the media. This is something that a lot of job boards really struggle with. And they think about, well, for years, we've been selling job posting ads for $200 or 1,000 euros or whatever. And now you're talking about paying us a tiny, tiny fraction of that per click. We don't want to give up all of that revenue from selling job postings that are post and pray, that maybe or maybe don't work. Our experience at College Recruiter has been that by moving away from traditional duration-based advertising, 200 euros for a 30-day posting, and toward cost per click, that we actually increased our revenues. And the reason that we did that is because if an employer needs to post an ad and is not guaranteed any results at all from posting that ad, that makes that purchase much more risky. But if the risk is on the job board, on College Recruiter, the employer is more likely to post most of their ads and often all of their ads. So rather than getting 2 or 3 or 4 job posting ads from an employer, we'll get 1,000, we'll get 5,000. And even if we don't make nearly as much money per posting, we make a lot more revenue from that customer, from that employer, because we do the volume, we make it up in volume. One of the interesting things that also is of benefit if you shift to programmatic and cost or pay for performance or both, is that you're going to immediately see an increase in the number of diverse candidates. Diversity means different things in different markets. It means different things to different employers. It means different things for different job posting ads. But in general, we're talking about people of color and we're talking about women. Appcast, which is for several years now has been owned by Stepstone, has done some data analysis. And what they see is 35% more people of color and 10% more women apply to jobs that are advertised programmatically. So why is that? Well, they don't know, and I don't know, but I agree with their suspicions. Their suspicions are that when you run an ad programmatically, you're running it across a much larger number of job boards and other media. By running it across a large number of job boards, you are more likely to run your ad on job boards that you would not have purchased it in a post and pray model, in a duration-based model. You're going to be basically running that ad where you would not have before, in part. That means that you're going to be running ads on more niche sites. So yes, you'll continue to run ads on sites like Indeed and LinkedIn, but you're also going to be more likely to run ads on sites that have far less traffic, but the traffic is more diverse. The candidates that use those sites tend to be more diverse. And that's going to deliver to you a more diverse group of candidates. And especially since George Floyd was murdered a couple of years ago, diversity has become more important for most employers around the world. Another benefit is that it improves, programmatic improves operational efficiencies. You need fewer people, if you're a job board, to sell programmatic advertising than you do if you're selling traditional advertising, postings one at a time. So again, why is that? Before we switched over to programmatic, about 35 to 40% of our customers would buy from us month after month after month after month. Now, about 96% of our customers buy from us month after month after month. Our renewal rate is far higher. We now rarely have conversations with employers that would be new customers. Most of our sales related conversations are with customers who have been with us for months or years. And the conversations, therefore, are much more about customer service, about optimizing a campaign, about potential changes to the jobs they're sending us or their budgets. And so it's a very different conversation than trying to win a new customer. For anybody who has experience in sales, you know that it costs a lot less to keep a customer than it does to win a new customer. And you need fewer salespeople, and that leads to more efficiencies. So let's talk about the coming storm, where programmatic is coming. And for those of us in markets like the US, where it's already kind of a big deal, this is not news. For those in markets where programmatic has not yet become very popular, there's probably some nervousness, and for good reason. So globally, recruitment advertising is about a 20 billion, that's billion with a B, industry. All types of recruitment advertising globally is about 20 billion. About 7 billion, so roughly a third of that, is in the US. So, the US has nowhere close to a third of the world's population, but we're doing about a third of the world's programmatic. The addressable programmatic market, in other words, if you get rid of LinkedIn recruiter seats, and if you get rid of resume searching and other kinds of non-job posting ads like display advertising, if you get rid of that from recruitment advertising, that 7 billion drops to about 5.5 billion. And so why do we talk about that as being addressable? Because we don't really think that employers are going to give up their LinkedIn recruiter seats or resume searching or display advertising and shift those dollars to programmatic. We think that the shift to programmatic will be coming from job posting advertising, not basically resume searching and display advertising. So of the 5.5 billion, how much of that comes from enterprise? In other words, large organizations, those organizations with 1,000 or more employees, or gig economy employers like Uber, et cetera. And then also job boards. College Recruiter would be in this group of $2 billion, even though we have nowhere close to 1,000 employees. So that drops you down to about 2 billion. Now, the reason why that's important is that those enterprise organizations are the most likely to shift first to programmatic, at least in part, because their budgets are so large, they can afford to allocate 5 or 10% of their budget to programmatic for a year or two to kind of figure it out and then switch over. But if your budget is in the hundreds of dollars or euros a year, it becomes very, very difficult to shift any of that budget over to programmatic. In 2021, so just last year, the total programmatic spend in the US was 1.5 billion. So of the 2 billion enterprise, plus a little bit from other areas, about 3/4 of the recruitment advertising spend in the US is programmatic. So For my friends in Europe and elsewhere, when you're trying to sort of understand how much of the US advertising, job posting advertising is programmatic from large organizations or organizations that at least spend a lot of money, about 3/4 of it is already programmatic. And we think that within just a few years, that's going to go to 90%. So where does the 90% of that 7 billion total recruitment advertising come from? Why 90%? Why not 80%? Why not 60%? Why not 95%? 90% is the same number that Google, Facebook, etc., sell programmatically for consumer marketing. Consumer marketing is the promotion of or the advertising of products and services. So if you go to Facebook or you go to a site on Google or a site that works with Google and you see an ad for whatever it might be, chances are that's consumer advertising. They're trying to sell you a hotel room. They're trying to sell you a new car. 90% of that globally is programmatic. Employment advertising follows consumer advertising, in this case, by about 20 years. So it's pretty easy to actually look over to consumer advertising to see what's happening there and then extrapolate. So is it coming to your market? The answer to that question is maybe. It depends on your market. So is your market, is your country, is your metro area, is your occupational field that you're focused on? Is there a large amount of that advertising that's already being done on a cost per click or cost per application basis? If so, programmatic is more likely to be coming sooner than later. Is it highly fragmented? There are some countries, Poland is a good example, where there are really only a couple of big job boards, and then the rest are very, very small. Germany is another one where Stepstone really dominates in Germany. Germany is not a highly fragmented market, and that means that programmatic is less likely to be coming quickly to Germany than it is to other countries like, say, Canada, or Australia is another one that has some fragmentation. Seek is pretty big in Australia, but there are a number of other players. And the third one is one that most people don't really think about, and that is how common is it for the employers or the staffing companies or whoever's advertising the position to integrate with the job board or media? How common is it for you to provide the media, the job board, with some kind of real-time data showing them if the candidate that they sent to you applied? And that's much more common in some markets than in others. If there is that hook into the ATS, if you're providing that data to the job board, if that's common in your market, then again, that is going to make it more likely that programmatic is coming quickly. Now, I've heard, I was over in Belgium in November when the e-Recruitment Congress was originally supposed to happen. Unfortunately, COVID had other ideas. But I heard then from a number of people in Europe that actually programmatic is really popular in Europe and that it's really not true that the US is far ahead. There is some data to support that. I can email these slides to anybody afterwards who might want to have a closer look. I know it's pretty much impossible to see them from a seat in a hotel or in a conference ballroom. But what these 3 slides basically show is that job boards in Europe are reporting that they do have a lot of programmatic business, very, very similar to the US. Personally, I don't believe it. I think that the respondents to that survey were not the same kinds of organizations that were responding to the same survey in the US. You had 2 different kinds of respondents. In Europe, the respondents were much more likely to be very large job boards. And in the United States, the respondents were much more likely to be very small job boards. I think that when you just sort of look at where the money is being spent, the US is far ahead of the rest of the world. And so the rest of the world can look to the US to see what's coming. Now, what we found at College Recruiter is that if you're going to implement programmatic and cost per click successfully, you need to look at your pricing, your product, your people, and your process. And all of those are going to change. And this is why a lot of job board owners like me have been kind of pulling out their hair over the last few years, because it's a massive change to the way that you do business. Pricing. We used to have a lot of employers that would sign up for a month, whether it was one posting or whether it was 50 in postings, but they would purchase postings for a month and then not for 2 months. And then 3 months later, they'd buy again, and then they wouldn't buy for 2 months. What's happened with us now is that almost all of our customers are subscription-based, meaning that we continue to run their ads month after month after month after month until they tell us to stop. And that is a very, very good use of programmatic, to automate it, to let the software decide where to run the ads and which ads to run. We reference 2 different kinds of cost per click. When we receive a posting from a customer, for example, from an employer, we refer to that internally as customer spend cost per click, which is different than distribution cost per click, CPC. Distribution cost is when we send that job out to another job board. If an employer pays us $1 per click, we might share 50, 60, 70 cents to another job board to drive the candidate traffic. Remember the conversation about splits early on? We have the relationship with the employer in that situation. Another job board might have the relationship with the candidate, and we basically share what the employer is paying to deliver that candidate to that employer. Internally, we need to differentiate. A lot of job boards refer to both as bids, and it gets confusing. There's miscommunication, and they make mistakes. Sometimes internally, they'll sell a job posting to an employer at a lower cost per click than what they're buying that click from another job board. And that's obviously a recipe for disaster. And when I referred early on about increased revenues, before we switched over to programmatic in cost per click, the largest amount of revenue that we could get from an employer was $12,500 a year for job postings. That was our biggest package. Now we have a number of them who are spending over $100,000 a year because, and they're happy about it because we're delivering 10, 20, 30, 40 times the number of candidates to them. Product. Traditional duration-based advertising is sort of what most job boards globally are still working with. And another way of selling or creating a product is a flat CPC. That's usually kind of if a job board switches, if an employer switches, that's the first step. So in other words, regardless of the job, regardless of the hiring need, we're going to pay $1 or €1 or £1 per click. And that's okay. That's better than I think Post and Pray, the traditional model, but it's not as good as what's called job level bidding or variable bidding. And that's where you pay a different amount per click for a different job. If you want something more, you should pay more. If you want something less, you should pay less. So we have employers that pay us 25 cents a click for one job and $1 per click for another job. If they pay $1 per click for the second job, it usually just means that they are having a harder time hiring the people they need. They might need to hire 100 people instead of 1. They might need to hire chemical engineers instead of cooks in fast food restaurants. And then another thing for the product, subscription. The employers in the room, the job boards in the room, I strongly encourage a subscription model. It saves everybody a lot of time. When the employer wants to be done, they're done. But you don't have to keep considering buying month after month after month. The people, we have far fewer salespeople now than we used to, and we have far more customer service and developers than we used to. But one common trait is that they have to be creative thinkers. They have to problem solve. Just sort of being on a treadmill and doing the same thing day after day, hour after hour, does not work in the programmatic world. So if your organization lacks creative thinkers, if it lacks people who are just intuitively really good with math and like it, then you better start staffing up for those people because you are going to need them. The process, Very different for traditional duration-based ads. From a job board perspective, you post a job and then you kind of forget about it for 30 days. And same thing for an employer. When you switch over to performance-based, literally the software is making decisions on an hourly basis. Does this job continue to run? Does it not continue to run? How do we prioritize it? Does it show up high in the search results, low in the search results? You can have caps, a certain number of clicks within a certain number of days or month. This job should only run for 10 days. This job should run for 30 days. So you can set a lot of rules. You can really customize it. And because of all that, you need to have what we call traffic managers or campaign managers. You need to have people who are really watching every campaign and helping the software make the right decisions. The software is a lot better than it was 5 years ago, but it's still kind of in its infancy, most of the software programs around the world. And we already talked about the increase in revenues. Very, very common for our customers to give us all of their postings and tell us to run the ones that we think will work the best, rather than for some low-level recruiter trying to make decisions. Should I spend my budget on this one? Should I spend my budget on that one? One of the things I love about performance-based advertising, cost per click or programmatic, is that money chases quality. If we are able to deliver candidates who apply to your jobs and you interview them, which means that the candidate is of good quality, then you are going to be much more likely to spend more money with us. But if we send you a whole lot of candidates and you don't interview any of them, that means that the quality is poor and you're going to stop spending money with us. So money chases quality. It's good for the customer, it's good for the advertiser, and it's also good for the job board. We talked about subscriptions. I think they're absolutely vital. And then another thing that we have seen is far more advertisers, employers, advertising agencies, other job boards that are customers of ours, et cetera, use what are called open IOs, open insertion orders, or some people call them purchase orders. In other words, they're authorizing us to deliver candidates to their jobs with no limits. There's no limit, there's no expiration date to the contract. And a lot of times there's no budgetary cap per month. And the reason for that is the advertiser or an organization like an Appcast or Jovio or PandoLogic or JobAdX, the programmatic job ad company, they are controlling, and their software is controlling what jobs we get for how many days and at what cost per click. So we as the media, the job board, we don't focus on trying to renew that job posting or that customer. Instead, we focus on delivering quality candidates to their job postings. And if we do that, the money works out quite well. The impact, our revenues have increased from 30 to 100% year over year for the last 4 years. And it's been about 50% a year the last couple of years, and we're doing it profitably. Our annually returning revenue 2 years ago in 2020 was 46%, which is kind of normal for a job board. In other words, what percentage of our customers, of the revenue we're getting from our customers, was kind of from the same customers in 2019 to 2020. So roughly half of the revenue we got in 2020 was from customers that also used us in 2019. The higher that number, the better it is. It means that you're spending less time and effort trying to renew customers, and you're more efficient. You're spending more of your resources on actually delivering the product rather than selling the product. In just a year, that increased by about 50% to 71%. And for 2022, we're already running well ahead of that. Our growth has come from the programmatic cost per click product, JobsThatScale. And also we're growing internationally. All of that was facilitated by our shift starting in 2016 from traditional duration-based to programmatic and cost per click. I'm not sure if I can hear any questions, but I would be more than happy to answer them now. Or if people want to, shoot them to me via Twitter, LinkedIn, email, whatever, happy to do so. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.